there from replay. Now, normally, I would not want to try to draw whatever connection I have with whatever guest we have, but this one is one guest that if you've been in the industry, you might not see him so much in the front, but you see, these are the people that make what you see, that bring the magic to you, the words that you hear, that put everything together. A writer's strike in US shut down the industry. There was nothing happening. So these are the kind of people that if they are not available, there is no industry. Xavier Ighorodje in the house. It is great to have you, sir. You are welcome.
Same here.
You've done so much. I might start reeling out your accolades. I don't know where we'll start. But maybe for some people that don't know, Shantytown, Covenant. Let's start going back. There's just so many. Let's go back a bit before we talk about recent ones.
Okay. So I started writing. The first telenovela I was on was Hush for African Magic. Hush replaced. Was the second telenovela they did, the second 260 episode telenovela they did. Then after Hush, I went on to Xavier. Then from Xavier, I went on to Ighorodje. From Ighorodje, I did Unbroken, there was Dilemma, there was Enache. So I've done a couple. Let me know, like
you have. You know, let's being a head writer. Let's talk about the process of writing. It's not something that is might be so much fun putting it all together. What is the process behind? How do how does it all come together? Does the director talk to you, give you an overbearing storyline, you start putting it into bits and pieces, the screenboard and all of that? What's the process like for you?
So process-wise, there's a statement I like to say that it's 1,001 ways to skin a cat. So there is no sure way that you can say, oh, this is how it must be. But I believe very heavily in collaboration. So depending on the project and depending on what the client wants, we can either work highly collaboratively or they can give me like the creative freedom to do what I want. But of course, everything comes with, it all depends on how we negotiate and also the kind of conversations we are having. So for TV, for instance, TV is highly collaborative because not often do you see one person writing. It's ridiculous to imagine one person writing 260 episodes of primetime TV.
Primetime TV, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to collaborate with a lot of very good people. If one person tries, then you probably would pass out or die around like the 20 episode mark.
You would. It's impossible.
Yeah, so you bring like a team together. But before you even bring the team, you have a conversation with the showrunner or whoever is the creative director so that we all agree on what the story is like. Before we even get there, you have conversations. If you're a smart head writer, you have conversations with the network executive. It can be the head of production, it can be your commissioning editor. That's just so we are all on the same page on the kind of story we are trying to tell. So I, as a head writer, I may come up with the original idea, but then there is also what the network would require that idea to become. Because again, at the end of the day, they need to be able to market that idea. Right, so there are certain things that they'll be like, okay, this storyline, maybe we don't want to see it, maybe we can adjust it like this. So we have all those conversations and we harmonize. So what I then do from there is have like a meeting with my writers where we break the story. I kind of have a process where before we even show up at the writer's room, we have like 1 month of story development. So I do that so all my writers are very comfortable when it comes to pitching and then they can confidently say what their story is like. There are other people who have other processes. Usually, traditionally, we all show up at the workshop and we talk about stories. So for instance, we say, oh, Tom and Jerry, what's going to happen? Okay, you tell us how Tom gets married to Jerry's cousin and blah, 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 blah. This person tells us something else. Then we show up at the workshop and we pitch these stories before network executives.
And everybody...
For the first time. And then when you pitch it before network executives, they may be like, oh, I don't quite like this story direction, but I like this thing. Can we merge it like that, right? So we have all those conversations in the room. But what I do before this process is, if I have 1 month of this thing happening already with me and just my writers, then they feel a lot stronger or more confident about their stories. Then I take these stories, right? I take it to my showrunner, even before we show up at workshop, so that the showrunner can tell us, oh, I don't like this thing, let's adjust those things. So when we come before network, our story is a lot more streamlined. And then we don't do all those back and forth.
Does the showrunner know the end from the beginning and then you connect the dots? Or do they just give you a start and then you draw the dots up until the end?
So it depends. So for instance, for telenovelas, it's hard to know what the end is.
Okay.
Right? It's hard to know. You can get an impression, a mental impression of what the end would be like. So for instance, taking for instance the show Covenant, we knew that for Covenant, it was a story, at the heart of it was a story of JK and Talia.
Okay.
Right? And we know how JK, he leaves his father that is a political godfather, a very big person there, and he goes to live with the masses to get to know them. We knew his journey was going to be from the slums back into the political class. And then he would have to give some bit of control there and he would try to do the righteous thing. And at the end of the day, he will realize that in order to do the greater good, I may need to sully my hands a little bit.
Yeah.
So you get that at the end of the day, he comes to that realization, and it's only from there he can save these people. So you can see that I get an idea of what the end will be like. But I don't know the scenes, like scene by scene or breakdown. I can't do all those things about it. Exactly. So we now start, but it's because it's a 260. It's a lot longer.
It's a lot
But
longer.
if it's say a 6 episodes, 1 hour, then before I start going into production, I need to know everything. In fact, all the scripts have to be written. It's a different ballgame entirely. So for Shantytown, for instance, of course, we know the end. We've written everything first before you go into production. For Covenant, you can't have done that because it's 260 episodes.
Definitely.
We probably would have written like 40 or thereabouts before we go into.
How do you deal with writer's block?
Okay, so I like to believe that I don't have writer's block because I practice what I call competent delegation.
Okay.
And for competent delegation, it means that I need to surround myself with a lot of people who I can delegate things to. And in order to do that, that was why we were talking earlier where I said I had to bring some people in because I want to train these people to be competent enough for me to tell them, handle this and that for me. But then the kind of things I deal with is mental fatigue. So I get tired because I'm handling like a lot. So when those kind of things come, I would like to rest, maybe sleep, maybe game or do something like that. But then why I'm doing those things, that's why I'm not writing. What I'm doing in that period is I've delegated certain tasks to certain people that I've surrounded myself with.
And when you have a team like that, it can keep going.
It just keeps going.
24/7
Exactly,
and all of that,
exactly.
without
And then,
having...
yes, and then if one of us is incapacitated or has writer's block or is ill or something or has a private emergency to deal with, the other one is almost like one for all for one.
All for
the
one.
rest of us, we can pick up the pace while that person is resting.
Wonderful.
That was why I did that whole thing I told you about I did for Covenant, where I had to bring like a small team, but all of us were dedicated into doing a certain story. And shout out to Mr. Femi Odugbemi, because he was very, very uber supportive in this entire process. Femi Odugbemi, Larry Shupona, like this, that was the creative director, and then people from Network. It was a very amazing process.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about your upcoming projects. You have Dust, which will be premiering on Monday. Tell us a bit about Dust and what to expect from Dust.
So Dust is, how do I put it? Dust is one of the shows I feel like I relaxed with writing Dust because the original story idea was from one of my long-term partners and collaborators, Donald Tombia. He had this story that was set, I think, in like a rural area and all those kind of things. And then when the pitch came to me, the network wanted to revamp it in its entirety. And I had these conversations with the showrunner on what I thought I wanted to do with that project. And they were like, okay, I like this idea, but can you change it like I explained and all that? And what we wanted to do was, I feel like this may be giving spoilers, but we wanted to take one of the classic Shakespearean story and then reverse it. Now I can't say what the classic Shakespearean story is, because if I say that, I'll be giving a lot out there.
Right.
But think of it like, of course, the example I'm giving is not this example. But if it were Macbeth, and you know how a prophecy leads Macbeth to become the king, but at the end of the day he dies. What if we reverse it from there, and it's not a prophecy that leads him to his death? It is something else that leads him to his salvation. Like that, you can see how I just take this one and I'm doing the opposite. So it's something like that, but it's not Macbeth. So but there's a prophecy involved, but it's not Macbeth.
Did you always want to be a writer?
For the longest of times, I knew I wanted to create. I just didn't know what I wanted to do.
Exactly. Nice.
As a child of maybe about 2 years or 3 years, one of the things I used to do was I would watch Voltron on TV, and then I would cut out papers and use it to just act and do all those kind of things. And then when the age of the internet came and I went to make like my first email address, I told myself that I was making this email so that I could send pitches to Universal Studios and they would make movies. Like I didn't know it was screenwriting that those things were called, but then I had to go through an entire process. And now I'm also evolving as a human being. I realized that I don't just want to be a writer, I want to be a showrunner for TV, which is a writer, producer, and that is the executive, exactly just in charge of creating these worlds and bringing it to life.
You know, when I think of showrunners, of course, one of the most famous showrunners had to be D.B. Wise, just talking about Game of Thrones. That's when showrunners came, you know, and a lot of, because of the flack that they got, why is the story going this way? Have you ever gotten that kind of feedback where people are so angry with you? Maybe you kill off a favorite character. Maybe you did something that the thing is, everybody just, you know, and then they come, Xavier, behold you. You ever encountered that?
A lot. So one of the things is, I'm not desensitized to feedback, but then I do not allow feedback affect my my understanding of myself. So let me put this in perspective. For the shows we do on Africa Magic, which airs, most of my shows, they air from Monday to Friday, every week from 8 o'clock to 8:30 or 8:30 to 9 o'clock. Now, every night, there's a community of fans that tweet about the show, which means that each episode gets censored by 1,000 critics. So when the praise is high, I do not let it get into my heart. And then when the criticism is, of course, very
loud,
high, I do not let it get into my head. So I take everything in good measure and I ask myself, okay, this is the thing they like about this. And okay, can we keep it consistent? This is the thing they hate. Did I do this deliberately to get this reaction?
So sometimes does feedback affects the process from what you actually wanted to do at the end? Feedback
For long form storytelling, like a 260 episode, feedback does.
Oh, okay.
But for like something that is short form, 13 episodes, 20, we've already finished writing. So whatever feedback you are giving me, it won't particularly affect what I'm doing. Exactly. But then for telenovelas, we know that, okay, traditionally, the way telenovelas used to work back in the days was that as you are writing, it's airing. So when it airs and you see certain things, you can change your writing and push out those scripts. But for us, we've written like, let's say 50 episodes in advance. So when the show is airing, we've already written 50 episodes in. So sometimes the feedback, we can't even use it. But then if we're in the current timeline where we know that, oh, they are vibing like this about these characters, and we know that we are going to turn these characters and make them enemy or probably kill them off, we are like, yes, they are going to cry on national TV. But then we are doing those things deliberately.
Wow.
The thing is, the failure is, when I want you to feel fear, and instead you are happy, or I want you to feel happiness, and then you are pissed. Then you realize that as a writer, I have probably not landed the emotional arcs of this story.
Xavier, if we continue, we'll spend 3 hours here. We'll just be talking. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And here's wishing you the best. Keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I went to call you personal again because you were on Covenant.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, it's been a pleasure having a wonderful discussion with Xavier. We'll just take a time and I'll stay with us. We'll be back in a bit.